Welcome to the Women's March Canada podcast, Making the Equality of Women in Canada the New Norm. This is episode 5, titled 16 Days and Grandmas. My name is Melissa Durl and I'm your host, inspiring, uniting, and leading the charge for the advancement of women across Canada. Please give a warm welcome to this week's guest, Hillary Elliot. Hilary is the co-chair of GRAN, which is the Grandmothers Advocacy Network. GRAN is a non-partisan organization working across Canada at a local, national, and international level for the human rights of grandmothers, children, and youth of sub-Saharan Africa. And now I first heard about GRAN when it was part of the Stephen Lewis Foundation. So Hilary, tell me a little bit about that transition and how that happened.
Okay, thank you. Yes, many of the members of GRAN were originally with the Stephen Lewis Foundation, and some continue to be, and to work with the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign. Mm-hmm. And that campaign is a fundraising campaign with the same cause in terms of we both work for the grandmothers in sub-Saharan Africa and the children that they're looking after. But because there are issues in terms of combining fundraising with advocacy, we became a separate organization and we do entirely advocacy. So the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, the Stephen Lewis Foundation raises funds. We raise consciousness, and we raise politicians up to get to their highest levels of social justice. And that's what we try to do. So we operate on the sort of policy and political level, not a fundraising level. So there's the two organizations.
So give me an example of what that would look like for your organization.
All right, well, right now we're working on 3 major issues, and one of those is access to medicines.
Yes.
So an example from that would be that as Canada enters into trade agreements, there are intellectual property provisions within those trade agreements, mm-hmm. some of which can enhance access to medicines and some of which can detract from access to medicines and make it very, very difficult for affordable medicines to get to developing countries or for affordable medicines to get to our country.
Right.
So we've submitted briefs to Parliament about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example. Mm-hmm. And we're working right now on the very controversial NAFTA agreement.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. What an interesting perspective on NAFTA. You know, we often hear about the softwood lumber and the big heavy hitters, but what you're doing is really important on the medicinal side, I guess, medicine side. Yeah.
It is very important, and it does not get as much attention because the political issues of the day tend to dominate, and so that's one of the things we try to do is raise awareness about that we're concerned about this. We have partner organizations who are concerned about it. So on that kind of file, we would work with groups such as Médecins Sans Frontières. Mm-hmm. And everybody's aware of Médecins Sans Frontières. So when we say, well, Médecins Sans Frontières is concerned about this, then they sort of say, oh, really? So maybe we should be too, and we should. There's a lot of things going on in those agreements that we were going to have to live with for a very long time that can come back and really hurt us and can hurt the world.
Is Minister Freeland listening to you?
Minister Freeland is very, very busy, but we have certainly communicated with Minister Freeland.
Yeah.
And I think thinking about her writings in the past and her perspective, I think she understands what those issues are in terms of those trade agreements. Certainly what we hear, publicly from Minister Freeland is all about the advantages of trade for Canada. And there's no denying that there is that perspective. That's an important perspective for these trade agreements. Mm-hmm. So, we just keep pushing on some of these other issues that don't get as much attention.
Yeah, good for you. I think she's one of our great politicians at this time. And I think she's wonderful. So it's good to hear that she's working with you and hopefully working with you more. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about GRAN and how you got involved.
Well, I got involved initially because I did hear Stephen Lewis talking about, I remember the face of AIDS in Africa is the face of the grandmothers. And I was so struck by that because that was not a perspective I had. And at the time I was working and I thought, well, once I'm retired and have a little bit more time, this is an issue that I'd like to work on. So I was in Calgary at the time. I'm in Ottawa now. And we had a small but very dynamic group we call the Advograms.
Yes.
And I joined them. And then we were just...
an advocacy grants?
Yes,
yeah, right on. Okay.
Yeah, so that would be, wow, 6 years ago. 7 years ago, something like that. And so that group still goes strong. And that's sort of the way GRAN operates. We have a lot of members here in Ottawa. Not surprisingly, it's a pretty political city. Yes. And there's quite a lot of members in Vancouver. And then there's sort of smaller groups all across the country. So we really are a national network. So I love being involved with them, and in some ways they became really good friends, and just had a really good time getting to know them. So when we came to move, it was wonderful for me because I already had a network here in Ottawa, all the GRANs, right? Yeah. So that's how I got involved.
And you have to be a grandma?
No.
Okay.
No, we're open to all, but our focus is on the grandmothers in Africa, and many of us are grandmothers. I mean, that strikes to the heart, when we see our own grandchildren and think about what those grandmothers are going through in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on your webpage and I noticed, the diversity of your organizational team that you're one of the co-chairs of. How does that work exactly? Do you have monthly meetings? Are you doing them on video conference? Like, what does that look like to keep everybody up to date on all the I mean, it's, you just talked about one small part of what you're doing. I shouldn't say small, but one of the three pillars around medicine. But there's a lot going on any given day for you. So how do you keep everybody in the loop and organized and on the same page?
Well, that's a work in progress all the time, especially as technology changes and as our issues change. We have to change. So you mentioned the website, and that's a challenge for us. We have 4 volunteers who look after that website as best they can, and I think do an amazing job. But the issues in terms of keeping a website going when you don't have any staff. We have no staff. We're all volunteers. So the website is key. We do what we call a monthly update, and that's about a 4-page document, and it is exactly what it says. It keeps people up to date on what's going on, and typically it would highlight some actions that we're currently taking. So, for example, the November update will be about the 16 days of activism. A lot of it will be about that. Mm-hmm. So that goes out. We have a steering committee of about 30 members from across the country, and they each have their own network. So this update goes out to the 30 steering committee members. They then send it out to their network. Mm-hmm. We're very fluid, and we do use the term network. So we know that we've got over 400 members, but we also know that our reach goes further than the 400. So it's a little hard to give specific numbers on that. But then we also do, we send out what we call direct messages. So we do this not too often, maybe once every couple of weeks, and that will usually be something we really want people to write a letter now or to attend a certain event that's going on in their city, whatever. But anyway, that will come out as an email to people who have said they want to be on our email list. So that's another way.
Well, you mentioned the 16 days, so let's talk a little bit about that. This is the UN has deemed them the 16 days of activism, and they start November 25th and they roll until December 10th, which is Human Rights Day. So what is GRAN going to do this year around the 16 days?
Well, it's huge because this is one of the campaigns that has really attracted a lot of attention from our grandmothers. This is the 3rd year that we'll have undertaken it, mm-hmm. and this will be the biggest year yet.
Oh, wow.
So across the country, we're going to be lighting up buildings, lighting up legislatures, lighting up city halls, lighting up, the big TORONTO sign at City Hall in Toronto. That will be orange. All across the country, there will be, the light of orange, which is the color, of course, of the UN Unite campaign, will be glowing across Canada. So that's one thing.
How do you think lighting up buildings helps people understand what's going on? And I mean, really, when we talk about activism, how does that help?
Because it starts the conversation. And so people will ask why there's a certain color, because that tends to be done a fair amount these days, right? You have to sort of get in line for which color is going to be shown at any time. But then people ask the question, and then you can get into a conversation. And so I think part of the UN days is intended to raise awareness. It's not just raising awareness, it is trying to galvanize action as well. But raising awareness is the first step on that. This year might be a little bit different because I think awareness has been triggered by so many events over the past year or 2 years that I think people are, this is just my feeling, but that people are more open now or ready or frustrated enough that they want to take some more concrete action. And so, for us, then what we're asking, so is the United Nations is asking governments and civil society organizations to look at what you can do. And so we're suggesting to the Canadian government that, having recently put together a feminist international assistance policy, which is a major step forward and which focuses on women and girls and focuses on ending violence and focuses on supporting women and girls, that we need to put resources behind this policy to make it work. And so that will be the message that we're bringing to the government right now.
100% agree. So how can Women's March Canada help you with that? Because I think every one of our listeners 100% agrees with this.
Well, there's all sorts of ways that you can. You can write to your MP or go and visit your MP and talk about this issue. I guess, as I was looking at some of your previous podcasts and how Women's March Canada is set up, I realized that it was very focused on Canada, and I wondered, to what degree our organization or network fit with that. But in my mind, it fits, because I think we can't solve any of these issues in isolation anymore. And I think it's very disturbing that politically we see increasing isolationism from some of our major champions of human rights in the past. You've got to think about the UK and the United States of America as leaders in support of human rights in many ways. And I'm not saying they're no longer supporting human rights, but they're becoming politically more isolationist. And I think that's a very disturbing trend. So I think that for Canadians, being aware of how these issues enact in other regions and in other countries, and what Canada's response is to that is really important. And that we not just focus on our own local issues. They're tremendously important and we must focus on them as well, but we also need to look globally. So, speaking to your MPs, speaking to your community organizations, any of that, I think helps.
And do you have some tools on your website that people can look at? Would you like to tell us your website and where they should go on your website to, I think I saw some templates for letters to politicians. So for those people who are want to do something but don't know where to begin, you actually have quite a few tools on your website. So please go ahead and share them with us.
Yes, well, the website is easy. It's grandmothersadvocacy.org. All one word, Grandmothers Advocacy, all lowercase letters. So please do go and take a look. Remember that this is maintained by volunteers, but again, I think you'll find some great information there.
Yes.
So if you go look under the tabs, you'll find that there's a tab called Campaigns. And under those, you'll see that we have 3 areas. So I mentioned the access to medicines. The second one is education. And then the third one is the one that we're focusing on with the 16 days of activism, and that's ending violence against women and girls. And under each of those, you'll see what is currently, taking place and what resources they have. And the Orange Campaign, which is the 16 Days of Activism, has quite a lot of resources. And you can go in there and see a photo gallery, and that will give you a much better sense of what's going on across the country in terms of women gathering and doing different things during these 16 days. So there's lots of great photographs there.
Well, at Women's March Canada, we love to march. So if there's anywhere that we can do that, we'll be happy to support it. It's interesting too, because we're actually part of a larger organization called Women's March Global, so it does bring in all of the international issues around equality and human rights that we believe in so strongly. Yeah. I think with the podcast, one of the things that we really wanted to do was shine a light on amazing Canadian women that are doing incredible things at home, and some of them are doing it abroad. And so I think that's how we align together with GRAN.
Okay, yeah. Well, we are having a march here in Ottawa
Great.
tomorrow at 4:15 Minto Park. So it's a candlelight march to City Hall, and then there'll be some speeches and some entertainment. The mayor is going to proclaim the Ending Violence Against Women Day, and there will be some coffee and hot chocolate and tea and goodies.
And 16 days is oftentimes when you think of a campaign, how do you keep the momentum up for those 16 days? And I see that you've got some social channels, so you'll be pushing out some information on those so that people can keep up to date on it. Mm-hmm. But do you have events throughout the whole 16 days?
It varies across the country. So I know in Toronto they're having a panel discussion later, and I really just have to go back and say it depends. There's so many, we've got easily 24 or events going on across the country, different days. They tend to highlight the first day, the 25th, which this year is a Saturday. Mm-hmm. It's also the day before the Grey Cup, though I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
Ottawa's going to be a bit bananas.
Yeah. And then December 10th, which is Human Rights Day. So those tend to be the big ones. Okay. But any day is fair game, depending upon what's going on in the particular town at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just curious. You've got members across this country. There's going to be events going on. People can be updated on social. And as you're planning an event, you're so forward focused on it. But one of the things that I'm always really interested in is you've been with this organization for a while. What's one of the things that you're most proud of that GRAN has done?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess everybody has a different response to that. So I guess mine is a very personal one, but perhaps doesn't sound very exciting. But I was just so immensely proud of this organization when we submitted a brief and did a presentation to the Standing Committee on International Trade. And it was because I felt that the work was just so extraordinarily good and so compelling. In fact, one of our members who gave a presentation in Saskatoon, when she responded to some of the questions, she got like a standing ovation from the people in the room.
Wow.
I mean, so to see that kind of recognition and to know that we have the capacity to do that kind of quality of work was very moving for me. But as I say, that's not it's not a big, okay, so you can write a good brief,
Well, no, but that's really important. And I think that I love that story, because I also think too, don't underestimate the grants, right? Like that's a point that you can make too. You're all highly educated. Many of you are retired, at least that's what it looks like from your leadership page. But now you've all come together to actually, mobilize and motivate and make some change. And I think that there's just something really wonderful about that. So thank you.
Well, and that's what keeps me going is having this wonderful network of people to work with. So, it is a great organization. Yeah.
Well, Hilary, Women's March Canada and Women's March Ottawa would like to express their full support and appreciation for all the strides being taken by people like yourself at GRAN, the UN, and all the other groups involved in the 16 Days of Activism campaign. Your efforts in educating people and advocating for equality are tremendous. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that's tuned in to listen. Your comments are welcome and always encouraged. Please subscribe to our Women's March podcast channel, and you'll receive updates every time we update a new podcast. Our mission across Canada is to stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, of our safety, our health, and our families, recognizing that our vibrant and diverse communities are the strength of our country. This is the Women's March Canada podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Women's March CDA and on our website at womensmarchcanada.com. I'm Melissa Durrell. Have a great day.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.